There is a quiet moment in every life when the world you know begins to feel too small. It rarely announces itself with thunder. Instead, it arrives like a subtle shift in the air, a sense that something familiar has loosened its grip. For a young shepherd wandering the hills of Andalusia, that shift begins with a dream that returns night after night, repeating itself with a stubborn clarity he cannot ignore. In the dream, two children appear beside a great pyramid, their hands covered in dust and sunlight, telling him that a treasure waits for him there. When he wakes, he tries to dismiss it, but the dream lingers, as if refusing to leave until he fully hears it. His life before the dream is simple in a way that feels both comforting and incomplete. He travels with his flock from meadow to meadow, watching the clouds drift above him in patterns he reads like silent stories. He keeps a book at his side, not to escape reality, but to feel the presence of something larger than the small world he circles each day. The sheep follow him with quiet trust, and for a long time he believes this is enough. But the dream unsettles that certainty. It whispers that the horizon is not a boundary, but an invitation, that the life he knows is only a fragment of the life waiting for him. As he walks through the countryside, he begins to sense a restlessness growing beneath the surface of his thoughts. The journey from one pasture to another suddenly feels repetitive. He notices that the sheep follow the same routine without ever questioning why. They eat, sleep, wander, and return, content with motion that leads nowhere new. Watching them, he feels a sudden discomfort. If he continues living this way, will he eventually become like them, a being whose world shrinks to the size of habitual paths, whose sense of possibility dissolves from lack of use? A chance encounter deepens the internal tension. He meets an old man dressed in robes that shimmer in the sun like a forgotten piece of legend. The man asks simple questions, yet they cut through the shepherd's assumptions with uncanny precision. He speaks of the personal legend, the unique calling each person is born with, a calling that the universe continually nudges us toward unless we silence it with fear. Most people never answer their calling, not because they lack talent or opportunity, but because they grow too attached to comfort. They cling to predictable routines, to the approval of others, to the illusion that safety is the same as fulfillment. The old man's words feel like a mirror held up to the shepherd's life. For the first time, he sees how often he has chosen the familiar simply because it asked nothing of him. He sees how the flock, which once symbolized freedom, has slowly become a boundary he rarely crosses. The countryside he loves begins to feel not like an open world, but like a circle traced so often that the grass beneath his feet has grown thin. The dream that once seemed strange now feels like a message, a signal that the life awaiting him requires a step into uncertainty. There is a threshold in the human heart where fear and longing collide. Crossing it does not happen with fanfare. It happens through a quiet decision. When the shepherd sells his sheep to follow the path revealed in his dream, he steps across that threshold, not because he is certain of treasure, but because he is certain that regret would consume him if he stayed. His courage is not the absence of fear. It is the willingness to move forward even while fear whispers its many warnings. Traveling to a foreign land strips away everything familiar. The language sounds like music he cannot interpret. The colors, smells, and movements of the marketplace overwhelm his senses. For a moment he feels like a child thrust into a world too large for him to navigate. Yet beneath the confusion there is a spark of excitement. This is what new beginnings feel like. This is what inner transformation looks like before it becomes clear enough to name. But the world tests every dream. When he is robbed by someone he trusted, the shock sends him into a spiral of doubt. He stands in a strange city, penniless and alone, realizing that no one knows his name and no one owes him anything. The future he imagined collapses in an instant. He feels the heavy pull of despair, a force strong enough to drag him back toward the life he abandoned. It would be so easy to give up, to return home, to convince himself that the dream was foolish. Instead, he chooses to remain still. He watches his thoughts rise and fall like waves, and in that stillness, something subtle happens. He discovers that even without money, without guidance, without certainty, the desire to continue remains alive. It is small but steady, refusing to die. This moment marks the beginning of a deeper evolution. The shepherd stops seeing himself as a victim of circumstances. He begins to understand that setbacks are part of the path, not evidence that he chose incorrectly. He realizes that suffering becomes meaningful when it sharpens awareness, when it reveals an inner strength he did not know he possessed. This understanding leads him to a crystal shop perched on a hill overlooking the marketplace. The work he finds there is simple, but through simplicity, he begins to rebuild himself. The shop becomes a school, disguised as a workplace. Each day he cleans the dusty shelves, arranges fragile glassware, and speaks to customers with growing confidence. These tasks teach him patience, attention, and subtlety, qualities he never had to develop as a shepherd. He learns to see patterns in the flow of customers, to anticipate needs before they are spoken, to understand the difference between movement and progress. The shop owner, weary from years of repetition, becomes another kind of teacher. His life is a portrait of what happens when a dream is postponed for too long. He once longed to make a pilgrimage to Mecca, but he never left. Now the longing has hardened into a ritual of excuses. Listening to him, the shepherd sees the quiet danger of choosing security over growth. As months pass, the shepherd transforms the shop with his ideas. He introduces new ways to display the crystal, new ways to attract customers, new ways to create beauty in a business that had grown stagnant. Money begins to flow. The shop grows vibrant again. For a moment, he imagines staying, building a stable life in this foreign land. The thought tempts him because stability is seductive. It promises rest, it promises comfort, but the dream returns, reminding him that comfort is not the same as purpose. Leaving the shop requires more courage than leaving the flock. Before he left simplicity, now he leaves security. He chooses the unknown again, not because he is reckless, but because he understands a deeper truth. Every stage of life offers a comfort that can imprison you if you choose it too soon. Growth demands movement. Movement demands risk. He joins a caravan crossing the desert, trusting that the path ahead will reveal what he must learn next. The desert is a world without distraction. It stretches in every direction, like a vast mirror that reflects the mind back onto itself. Days pass in steady rhythms. The sun burns, the nights freeze, the silence presses against him until his thoughts become clearer than they have ever been. Without noise, the heart begins to speak in languages he never recognized. The caravan teaches him patience, humility, and discipline. He learns that progress is not always visible. Sometimes it is measured in endurance, sometimes in awareness. sometimes in the simple decision to take one more step. He meets a man who studies alchemy through books alone. The Englishman believes that knowledge lives only in text and formulas, but he struggles to apply it to life. Through him, the shepherd sees the difference between intellectual understanding and lived understanding. One fills the mind, the other transforms the soul. As they travel together, he begins to understand that wisdom is not collected. It is cultivated through attention to the world around him. As the desert stretches on, the shepherd becomes attuned to its language. He notices subtle shifts in the wind, the patterns in which animals move, the tension running through the caravan when danger approaches. This sensitivity arises not from magic, but from presence. He is learning to live without distraction, to observe without assumption, to trust the signs the world places in front of him. He discovers that the universe speaks continuously, but most people are too busy or too afraid to listen. By the time the caravan approaches the oasis, he feels himself entering a new stage of understanding. His doubts no longer dominate him. His fears no longer paralyze him. His dream no longer feels like a distant idea. It feels like a path that is forming beneath his feet with every step he takes. The desert has carved away the parts of him that relied on certainty. What remains is a heart strong enough to handle the unknown, and the unknown waits for him at the oasis, shimmering in the heat like a promise and a challenge at the same time. The oasis rises from the desert like a dream made physical, an island of water and green woven into a world shaped by silence and heat. After endless days crossing dunes that seemed identical in every direction, the sight of palm trees feels almost miraculous. But what matters more than the shade or the water is what the oasis represents. It is not merely a place to rest. It is a threshold between the person the shepherd has been and the one he is becoming. From the moment he enters the oasis, he senses that this place holds a different kind of knowledge. The desert taught him how to endure. The caravan taught him how to listen. But the oasis will teach him how to recognize signals that do not appear in sand or wind, but in people, in chance encounters, in the quiet fold of moments that seem ordinary until they reveal their purpose. Here he meets the woman whose presence alters the direction of his inner compass. She stands at the well with a calm that feels ancient, as if the desert itself shaped her voice. When their eyes meet, something shifts inside him, not with force, but with recognition. It is the strange and immediate sense that a part of his destiny has stepped quietly into view. Her name settles into him like a memory he somehow forgot to remember. Loving her does not feel like a choice. It feels like a continuation of something deeper. She listens to him the way the desert listens to wind, without judgment, without hurry, without fear. In her presence, he learns a truth he had never known before. Love that demands sacrifice is not love. Love that gives freedom is peekaboo. She does not ask him to stay in the oasis forever. She tells him that real love is aligned with the calling of the soul, not opposed to it. If he must continue the journey toward the treasure, then she will wait, not out of obligation, but because the desert has taught her to trust the return of things that belong. This love becomes a source of strength, but also a new kind of test. The shepherd realizes that the universe never introduces a gift without also introducing a challenge inside the gift. Love, which feels so expansive, also tempts him to remain where he is. The oasis is peaceful. The routines could be simple. He could build a life with her, avoiding danger avoiding uncertainty, avoiding the journey that demands so much from him. Yet deep within, he understands that what brought him here is not meant to end here. The oasis is a beginning wrapped inside an illusion of completion. Soon, he discovers another sign, one that is not gentle. As he watches the flight patterns of birds above the oasis, he senses something unexpected. The birds move with a tension that suggests conflict. He sees an image in his mind of armed tribesmen invading the oasis. At first, he hesitates. He wonders whether this vision is imagination or intuition, but the feeling is too strong to ignore. He approaches the tribal leaders, and though they doubt him, they prepare the oasis for attack. When the danger arrives exactly as he foresaw, the shepherd realizes that the language of the world is not metaphorical, it is literal, it is precise. It is a quiet force that speaks only to those who are willing to observe without expectation. This moment draws the attention of a man known only as the Alchemist, a figure whose presence carries an unmistakable gravity. The Alchemist sees in the shepherd something the shepherd himself cannot fully see. Not talent, not intelligence, but commitment. The commitment to continue seeking truth even when the path leads through fear. The Alchemist becomes a teacher, but not in the familiar way. He does not explain things gently. He does not provide comfort. He does not soften the edges of reality. Instead, he pushes the shepherd to confront truths he has been circling but not yet understanding. He teaches him that every journey has two battles, the outer battle of circumstances and the inner battle of becoming. Most people lose the second battle long before the first one begins. They surrender to fear, to comfort, to the false belief that destiny should arrive without effort. But the shepherd has shown again and again that he will walk forward even when he cannot see the next step. That is what makes him ready for deeper lessons. The alchemist agrees to guide him across the desert to the place where his treasure lies. But before they begin, he warns him that the journey ahead will challenge not only his body, but the foundations of his identity. To follow a dream to its end requires the dismantling of everything within that resists change. This is not a punishment, it is a purification. The shepherd understands this instinctively. Every important step in his life so far has required letting go of something he thought he could not live without. As they travel together, the alchemist reveals truths in fragments. He speaks of the soul of the world, a force that connects all things. He explains that when a person pursues their true destiny, the entire universe begins to realign, not by granting easy success, but by shaping the journey so that the person becomes worthy of what they seek. He teaches that courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to move despite it. He shows the shepherd that omens are everywhere and that awareness is not a skill but a state of being. The desert becomes a classroom again, but now the lessons are harsher. Some days the heat drains all strength from their bodies. Some nights the cold tests their will to continue. The silence grows heavier. The dunes appear identical no matter how far they travel. Yet through exhaustion, the shepherd begins to understand why the desert is part of the journey. It strips away unnecessary thoughts. It reveals the true voice of the heart. It demands the kind of surrender that makes transformation possible. Bandits capture them one night. The shepherd is threatened, mocked, and pushed toward despair. One of the bandits challenges him to prove that he can turn himself into the wind. It seems impossible. Even the shepherd believes for a moment that he has reached the end of his journey. But the alchemist tells him that this is the final lesson before true understanding. He must trust that the world speaks through him just as he has learned to listen to it. In the quiet of the desert, he approaches the wind, the sun, and the hand that shaped creation. He speaks not with words, but through the connection he has cultivated through every moment of awareness. What happens next is not magic, it is alignment. The wind rises from the horizon, powerful enough to stun the bandits and free him. When the sand settles, the shepherd feels something different inside him. For the first time, he understands not only the signs of the world, but his own place within them. This transformation does not feel like triumph. It feels like clarity, a clarity that has been building through every hardship, every risk, every leap into the unknown. He realizes that the treasure may lie ahead, but the journey has already given him something greater. He has become someone who trusts his heart, someone who reads the language of the world, someone who can face fear without becoming it. As he and the alchemist approach the pyramids, the shepherd feels the culmination of every step he has taken. Yet something inside him whispers that the final lesson has not yet unfolded. The pyramids rise from the earth with an ancient stillness, towers of stone shaped by human hands, but holding secrets that belong to eternity. He feels awe, but he also feels a quiet sense of readiness. He is not the boy who left home. He is someone who has walked through transformation and has emerged with a deeper understanding of himself and the world. The sands around the pyramids begin to shift. A new trial begins, one that will test everything he has learned. And the shepherd steps forward, knowing that the only way to discover the truth is to continue walking toward it. Standing before the pyramids, the shepherd feels as if time has folded itself around him. The sand presses quietly against his feet. The wind pulls at his clothes with a patience ancient enough to outlast kingdoms. The pyramids stretch upward with a stillness that does not belong to the world of ordinary moments. They feel less like monuments and more like questions carved into stone. He knows he has reached the place every sign has pointed toward. Yet in the center of this revelation, something unsettles him. The treasure is close, but the meaning of the treasure is still hidden. He kneels beside the pyramid and begins to dig. Each handful of sand feels both heavier and lighter than the last. He digs with the urgency of someone who senses an invisible clock counting down. Yet he also digs with a quiet reverence, aware that the desert listens. As the hole grows deeper, hope mixes with exhaustion. His hands ache, the sun lowers, the wind rises, and still there is nothing. No chest, no glint of metal, no promise fulfilled. Then shadows move around him. Bandits step from behind the dunes. Their voices cut into the silence with impatience and threat. They demand to know what he is searching for. He hesitates, torn between fear and truth. He tells them that he is digging for treasure because a dream told him to come here. They laugh, they beat him, they strip him of what little he owns. Their leader tells him something unexpected, almost mocking in tone. The bandit says he, too, once had a dream of treasure buried under an abandoned church in Spain, where a sycamore tree grows through the roof. But he never followed the dream because he was not foolish enough to travel across a desert for something so ridiculous. The bandits leave him broken in the sand. When their footsteps fade, the meaning arrives with a clarity so powerful it almost feels like laughter from the universe itself. The treasure was never here. It was never meant to be here. The dream brought him across the desert, not to reward him at the pyramids, but to transform him on the way. The treasure is real, but the journey was designed to reshape him until he could recognize the truth hidden in plain sight. The shepherd lifts his head toward the sky. For a moment he feels a strange mix of grief and gratitude. He remembers the old church in Spain. He remembers the quiet mornings spent watching his sheep graze beneath the branches of the sycamore tree. He realizes that the beginning and the ending of his journey sit on the same piece of earth. The world has looped him back to the place where everything started, not as a joke, but as a lesson. What he sought in distant lands has always been waiting in the soil beneath his feet. The journey was not wasted. Without it, he would never have become the person capable of seeing what had always been there. He begins the long return across the desert with a body weakened by hardship, but a spirit strengthened by understanding. Each step toward home feels lighter than the step before. He carries no gold, no proof of success, no story that would satisfy a skeptic. Yet he carries something infinitely more valuable. He carries the recognition that life speaks in signs designed for those who listen. He carries the knowledge that love, purpose, and transformation grow not from luck but from alignment with destiny. He carries the truth that courage is not the absence of fear, but the refusal to let fear decide the path. He returns to the oasis one final time. Fatima meets him at the well. Her presence is unchanged, but he is not. He holds her hands and sees in her eyes the same quiet desert wisdom that first stopped him. She understands without needing explanation. She told him once that real love does not prevent a person from pursuing their destiny. Now she sees that the journey has brought him back with a heart more rooted and a purpose more steady. Their reunion carries no desperation, it carries recognition. She chooses him not because he has returned, but because he has become who he was meant to be. He promises her he will return again soon, but he must finish what the journey began. He travels to Spain, to the abandoned church, where the sycamore tree grows through the roof. The church is as quiet as he remembers. The tree bends in the wind as if greeting him. He kneels at the place where he once slept beside his sheep. He begins to dig. The soil is damp. The air is cool. Within moments, he uncovers something solid. His heart beats faster. He digs until a wooden chest appears. The chest is old but intact. He opens it slowly, unsure whether the treasure will match his expectations or defy them entirely. Inside, he finds gold coins, jewels, relics of ancient journeys, and artifacts shaped by hands long forgotten. The treasure is real. It is as tangible as the earth he dug through. Yet the shepherd understands immediately that the treasure is not the wealth itself. The chest is a mirror reflecting everything he has learned. The gold represents the courage to pursue a dream. The jewels represent the lessons gathered through hardship. The ancient artifacts represent the wisdom of those who walked before him. The treasure is a symbol of the journey, not its reward. He sits quietly beside the chest, letting the realization settle. The world does not hide treasure to test people. It hides treasure to reveal them. Had he found this chest without the journey, it would have meant little. Now it means everything, not because of its value, but because he became someone worthy of understanding it. He thinks of the king who appeared at the beginning. He thinks of the crystal merchant, the Englishman, the alchemist, the bandits, the tribesmen, the desert, and Fatima. Each one was a teacher. Each one handed him a piece of the language of the world. The journey was not a path he walked alone. It was an unfolding of connections, guided by forces that move beneath the surface of ordinary life. He realizes something else. The treasure does not end the story. It begins a new one. The world is full of dreams waiting to be followed, signals waiting to be read, and transformations waiting to unfold. The shepherd has learned that destiny is not a single destination, but a series of calls that appear when the heart is quiet enough to hear them. He gathers a small handful of gold, enough to begin the next chapter of his life. The rest he will leave safely hidden until he decides how to use it with purpose. As he prepares to leave the church, the wind blows through the branches of the sycamore tree. The sound feels familiar, like the whisper of a friend. It reminds him of the first moment he learned to listen. He steps through the broken doorway of the church and looks out across the fields where his sheep once grazed. The landscape feels unchanged, yet he sees it with new eyes. The grass holds the memory of mornings spent dreaming. The tree holds the memory of nights spent wondering. Everything he sought across deserts and continents was always connected to this place. Not because the treasure was buried here, but because this was the soil where his heart first learned to speak. He breathes deeply. The air carries the scent of home, but also the possibility of horizons yet to be explored. He understands now that the world rewards those who follow their personal legend, not with comfort but with clarity. He understands that meaning grows through movement, not certainty. He understands that destiny is not granted. It is earned through choices aligned with truth. He begins walking toward the horizon. Behind him stands the tree that watched him dream. Ahead of him lies a world waiting to reveal its next secret. He knows that love waits for him in the desert. He knows that the universe will continue to speak in signs and signals. He knows that his heart will guide him with the same quiet determination it always has. The journey has changed him, but the change is not a closing, it is an opening. He is no longer a shepherd chasing a dream. He is a seeker who has learned to trust the language of the world. He walks not to escape his past, but to meet his future with awareness. The treasure he carries is not the gold in his hands, but the wisdom in his soul. As the sun rises behind him, he realizes that the greatest alchemy is not turning metal into gold. It is turning a life into meaning. And he has become, at last, an alchemist.